This is Highclere Castle, the real Downton Abbey. And I'm here today because I think the show filmed here is one of the most politically significant cultural objects in the modern world. I love Downton Abbey. I find it genuinely comforting. And I'm a working class comedian who spends most of his time thinking about inequality and power and why the system is rigged. And so the fact that I find it comforting should bother me way more than it does. I've watched 6 series of a show about whether a very rich family gets to keep their massive house. And I want them to keep it. Something has gone wrong, seriously wrong, and not just in my head. And I'm here to find out what exactly that is. Downton Abbey sells a feeling, doesn't it? Like a feeling of safety and calm, that the powerful were responsible stewards and are responsible stewards of our country, and that if everyone knows their place and does their bit, everything works great. And there's meaning in it. Sorry, just pausing the video to mention one thing. When I made this video, I didn't know I wasn't going to be able to use actual clips from the show Downton Abbey. So as a workaround, I'm going to use stills from the show with me doing impressions of the characters. Yeah, you heard me. Listen, I'm a very, very good voice actor, as you're about to find out. But if you want to see the full video as it's meant to be with the actual clips from the show, you can do that on my Patreon here. But listen, you're going to love the video just as it is, because actually once you've heard me do the characters, you're not going to want to go back to the original. But without any further ado, here is me as Lord Grantham.
I've given my life to Downton. I was born here and I hope to die here. I claim no career beyond the nurture of this house and this estate. It is my 3rd parent and my 4th child.
But the real history of that building is the exact opposite of warm and cosy. Because at the turn of the 20th century, a quarter of the British population lived in poverty. That's poverty, not can't afford stuff. Life expectancy was around 50, and the cause, well, wasn't laziness, Rees-Mogg. It was low wages and a system built to keep wages low. For example, women working in houses like Downton Abbey one could be dismissed instantly, denied a reference and left with nothing. And historical documents show that female servants dismissed from service accounted for 50% of prostitutes in Edwardian England. That's a structural outcome built directly onto the conditions of service in houses like this one. One of the things I do find quite funny about Downton Abbey is, in a very practical sense, it's a finishing school for prostitutes. I mean, there is also an argument for saying, within that perspective, that Lord Grantham is a 20th century Epstein. But I didn't say that, especially if you're a fan. Ooh, I'm not sure that's going to go in. Because the aristocracy didn't just benefit from the system. They actually, at the time, used their unelected political power to defend it at every turn. So, how does a show set entirely within that world, and not just depicting that world, but adoring it, how does that show become one of the most watched television dramas in history, loved by millions of people whose own great-grandparents were on the sharp end of that poverty? Well, this video is about why we defend the cage we're put in.
You mustn't take it personally.
Well, I do take it personally, Miss Hughes. I can't watch our family threatened with the loss of everything that they hold dear.
They're not our family.
Well, they're the only family that I've got.
In the 1990s, a social psychologist at New York University called Jost began asking the question, quite simply, why do people at the bottom of hierarchies defend them?
Why do poor people often oppose the redistribution of wealth? Why do we tolerate political and economic corruption? And where's the outrage, even after a series of worldwide financial crises? Over the last 30 years, the rich have gotten much richer, and the middle and working classes have either stayed the same or gotten worse. Over a 30-year period, the inflation-adjusted hourly wage in the US declined by more than 7%, and yet the share of total income going to the top 1% nearly tripled. Most theories in social science, including theories of relative deprivation, moral outrage, self-interest, motivation, identity politics, collective action, and revolution, all propose that people should object, perhaps even violently, to stark forms of inequality. Mahzarin Banaji and I sought to develop a system justification perspective that would help to explain why most people, including the disadvantaged, typically accept the social system as more or less legitimate. Could system justification motivation help to explain self-defeating and group-defeating behaviors, and can it also shed light on the psychological appeal of conservative ideas? That is, ideas that are favorable to the status quo.
Through 2 decades of work, Jost discovered what he called system justification theory. And what Jost discovered, that tendency is strongest in the people who benefit from the system the least. One of the most revealing experiments was run with his colleague Aaron Kay. And what they did was they showed participants descriptions of fictional people. Now, some of those people were described as poor but happy, others rich but miserable. And the idea that we're testing was pretty simple. Does the trade-off that you might have less money but you're happier make an unequal arrangement feel fair? Right? Well, those people exposed to the poor but happy or rich but miserable scored significantly higher on measures of system justification. They justified the system way more if they saw the people that were poor but happy and rich but miserable. Because while the inequality was identical, the story around it changed, and that was enough for people to want to defend the system. Then Jost took it into the real world with surveys of genuinely low-income people, people that were actually living with disadvantage. And this study found that disadvantaged groups who justified the systems they were living in had lower psychological distress and higher subjective well-being. In other words, the people at the bottom who most strongly believed that the system was fair and legitimate were genuinely less anxious and happier than those who didn't find the system fair. Jost called this the palliative function of ideology.
We do find that giving people the opportunity to justify the system leads them to report more positive affect and less negative affect, and to feel better and more satisfied with their own situation and the status quo in general. And so the general idea here is somewhat reminiscent of Karl Marx's oft-quoted but seldom understood notion that religious ideology is the opiate of the masses, that is, like ibuprofen, it placates and palliates. A lot of people don't realize that when he wrote that, people used opium when they were sick and tired, things like this, and had headaches. So they didn't have ibuprofen, so they used opium, and that's sort of what he was saying.
And he found that system-justifying beliefs actually reduce anxiety, guilt, dissonance, discomfort, and uncertainty. Because if you think the system is fair, you don't have to carry the psychological weight of your own disadvantage. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to fight. So you can just get on with things. Which is absolutely diabolical news, isn't it? Because essentially the psychological medicine for inequality is believing that society is fair. It turns out gaslighting yourself works. The fact is, in the short term, believing the system is fair makes you happier than knowing it isn't. And in some ways, it reminds me of this. You know, like if you go to a chicken shop and there's on the logo, there's always a chicken looking absolutely delighted outside. Hey, come in, eat me. I used to think that's so perverse. Like, I don't want to be reminded of a chicken when I'm going in to eat chicken wings. But I suppose if I do want to be reminded, I want to think that the chicken's absolutely loving it. Eat me, eat me. But it turns out the chicken is right. The chicken is right to be happy. Can't do anything else. May as well be happy. Because it's not that people are fooled, but it's that believing in the system, the current system where you're getting railed, in the short term, genuinely feels better than not believing in it.
So here's what's interesting about Downton Abbey, because I love it. In fact, millions of people love it. Not just elites, ordinary people. People with nothing to gain from the world that it depicts. And when you look at the message boards, when you see what people actually say and write about it, there is genuine love of the series there. But that's because Downton is actually quite an intelligent piece of work. It really does have its eye on class.
For once in my life, I'd like to sleep until I woke up naturally.
Iron the Times first. He only reads that at breakfast. And the sketch for her ladyship.
Why are the papers ironed? What's that to you? To dry the ink, you idiot. We don't want the lordship's hands to be as dirty as yours, do we?
I understand most of the ladies were taken off in time. You mean the ladies in first class? God help the poor devils below decks. They're snuff boxes. He collects them. Beautiful. Funny our job, isn't it? What do you mean? The way we live with all these riches within our reach. But none of it's ours. No, none of it's ours.
It's interested in saying something about what it costs to be downstairs.
Mamma, may I present Matthew Crawley and Mrs. Crawley?
The upper class characters are locked in social regulation so rigid it actually looks a bit like science fiction to us, right? The contortions seem absurd.
I've got a job in Ripon that I'll start tomorrow. A job? You do know I mean to involve you in the running of the estate. Oh, don't worry, there are plenty of hours in the day. And of course I'll have the weekend. We'll discuss this later. We mustn't bore the ladies.
Oh, sorry, what is a weekend?
The performance of order that they have to maintain just to function. The show doesn't hide it, it shows it, which does feel like a critique. Low-hanging fruit, sure, but still a critique. And it also actually shows economic precarity. It acknowledges it. Like, these people downstairs are trapped. You can see that, you feel it. So the show actually lets us look at it, that world, from the vantage point of the present, and then actually proposes a solution. The solution that Downton offers is humanity. Just reach out, just be a person. Never mind the hierarchy, just do the decent thing. For example, Carson the butler is being extorted.
This gentleman is an acquaintance of Mr. Carson.
What is he doing in here?
He says he has urgent business with his lordship. Urgent business.
And then Lord Grantham finds out.
May I ask who this is and what precisely is going on? I'm sorry, your lordship. Will you tell him or will I? We worked together at one time. We were like brothers, him and me. We were not like brothers. We were a double act at the music hall. You were on the stage, Carson? Carson, is this true? It is, my lord. We did quite well, didn't we? Well, yes, until you couldn't keep your hands out of the till.
Would you like us to go, Mr. Carson?
No, you know it now. You might as well bear witness to my shame. He threatened to expose my past and make me a laughingstock in this house. And in my vanity and pride, I gave him what he wanted. I stole. I'm a thief. She saw it.
I'd have never have said anything if I'd...
And now my disgrace is complete. My lord, you have my resignation. Really, Carson, there's no need to be quite so melodramatic.
And sorts it with money.
My dear Mr. Grebe, I'll tell you what is going to happen. When I give you £20, you will leave Downton immediately and we will never set eyes on you again. I'll have to see about that. If you return to this area, I will personally see your conviction for theft and for blackmail. Just a minute. You will serve between 5 and 10 years in His Majesty's custody. You think you're such a big man, don't you? Just because you're a lord, you think you can do what you like with me? I think it because it is true.
In fact, the same template runs through many episodes. Even the first episode, Bates arrives as Lord Grantham's new valet. He's an old comrade. They fought together in the Boer War. But he walks with a cane, a leg shattered by shrapnel. The moment the staff clock it, the hostility is immediate. Carson is furious. The job requires climbing stairs, carrying luggage, serving at table.
By the way, O'Brien says that Bates is causing a lot of awkwardness downstairs. You may have to do something about it.
I don't know why you listen to her.
It is quite eccentric even for you, to have a valet as a cripple.
Please, don't use that word.
Of course, I understand what it must be like to have fought beside someone in a war.
Oh, you understand that, do you?
Of course I do. You must form the most tremendous bonds, even with a servant.
Really? Even with a servant?
And eventually, Lord Grantham is persuaded. He tells Bates, Bates has to go.
The thing is, Bates, I said I'd give you a trial, and I have. If it were only up to me, you do see that Carson can't be expected to compromise the efficiency of his staff. It is unlikely that I should find another position, my lord. But surely in a smaller house where less is expected of you. It's unlikely. It's a bloody business, Bates, but I can't see any way around it. I quite understand, my lord.
The system has spoken. The hierarchy has made its judgment. And then Bates walks out to the car. And Lord Grantham watches him go, but he can't bear it and runs after the car and calls it to stop.
Get back inside and we'll say no more about it. It wasn't right, Carson. I just didn't think it was right.
The rules didn't change. It's just one human being looking at another. And it couldn't square the emotional truth of it, the emotional circle. It's just not right. And that's genuinely stirring. Why? Because of the constraints around it. Because you have to see how much it costs the Lord to do that simple human thing. And that makes the simple human thing feel like an act of courage. And that's the cumulative message of the show, isn't it? That the class system is absurd. Yeah, the hierarchy is rigid and ridiculous, but the way through it is compassion. Individual acts of decency that actually reach across the class divide. And that's a great message, but it's also a deeply convenient one. Because what it also does, awkwardly, is it accepts the system as it is. It actually doesn't ask you to dismantle the hierarchy. It just asks you to be kind within it. And it makes you, in a weird way, yearn for a version of inequality that feels manageable, where the conflicts are, obvious and you can understand it, and the solutions are human scale. And it's a bit twisted because it tells you that we can tolerate a world of wealth and class difference and inequality as long as there's humanity in it, which, as John Jost might say, is a very modern, very seductive form of system justification. And I'm not saying that Downton is a conspiracy. Like the writer Julian Fellowes, he didn't sit down to write propaganda. But the show's emotional logic does exactly what Jost describes. It makes the system feel legitimate. It makes hierarchy feel like it's just natural, it's the way of things. But then there's the catch. And the catch is that the short-term relief comes at a long-term cost. And this cost is most clearly shown in the science, the neurobiology of inequality.
So you get some big male who loses a fight and chases a subadult who bites an adult female who slaps a juvenile who knocks an infant out of a tree, all in 15 seconds. So insofar as a huge component of stress is lack of control, lack of predictability, you're sitting there and you're just watching the zebra and somebody else is having a bad day and it's your rear end that's going to get slashed. So tremendously psychologically stressful for the folks further down on the hierarchy.
A Stanford neuroscientist called Robert Sapolsky has spent decades, literally decades, returning every summer studying wild olive balloons? Decades, returning every summer to the savannah, studying wild olive baboons in the Masai Mara. Now his method, track individual animals, dart them with a blowgun, take blood samples under anaesthetic and measure cortisol levels and correlate those levels with positions in the social hierarchy. Yeah, you heard me. Robert Sapolsky spent 30 years darting baboons with a blowgun in Kenya to understand what poverty does to the brain, which is either the most dedicated piece of research in the history of science or an extremely niche holiday activity that he wanted a bulletproof alibi for. But there was rigorous science to it. Samples were always taken at the same time of day to control for the body's natural hormonal rhythms, and they were never taken after a fight or during illness or after sex, all of which will have influenced the data. After sex, I mean, it's true, but yeah, I don't like to dart the baboons after sex. It messes with the data. I found that out after darting them a number of times after sex. Now, it's all really rigorous research, although I can only think in my own head that the baboons, surely their cortisol levels spiked whenever they saw Sapolsky coming towards them with a blowgun. I can only presume that surely the baboons, their cortisol would spike whenever they saw Sapolsky heading towards them with a dart gun. Oh no, it's that guy again. 30 years. I just love this job. I don't know what it is. I just love this research.
Baboons living out in the Serengeti, this is like the greatest place on earth to be a baboon. There's like tons of food. You only have to forage about 3 hours a day to get your day's calories. The predators don't mess with you much because you're in these big troops. Infants usually survive all of that. If you only have to spend 3 hours a day getting your food, you've got 9 hours of free time every day to devote to being total jerks to each other and just generating psychological stress and social stress. Baboons were just like westernized humans. They've got the luxury of sitting around and they can spend all day long generating psychosocial nonsense with each other. And overwhelmingly, like if you're a baboon and you've got elevated levels of stress hormones, it's not because a lion is chasing you, it's because some other baboon has been working really hard to make you miserable. Like westernized stress, none of us die of famines anymore. And the privileged West, we all get these diseases of lifestyle, of slow accumulation of damage reflecting stress, and so do the baboons.
And what Sapolsky found was consistent and striking. Low-ranking baboons had elevated baseline cortisol and trouble turning off their stress response. They couldn't turn it off. It was there all the time. Subordinate males showed sluggish recovery after stressful situations. It suppressed immune function with fewer circulating lymphocytes, suppressed HDL cortisol, and elevated resting blood pressure. Really detailed research. And each of those markers is independently associated with the research literature on worse health outcomes and shorter lifespan. And crucially, Sapolsky found that this wasn't about physical danger. The psychological experience of subordination, the lack of control, and the unpredictability, the inability to be able to escape your place in the hierarchy was itself a stressor. The biological cost of chronic low status is real and measurable. The baboons at the bottom of the hierarchy had elevated cortisol, suppressed immune systems, higher blood pressure, and sluggish stress recovery. All of those symptoms just really sounds like a baboon that's working 2 jobs, one for McDonald's, one for KFC, with 4 baboon kids and struggling to pay the rent. Or one that's living with Sapolsky. And then the scientists, the neuroscientists, picked up a possible link between stress and depression. Years of low status, low control, high uncertainty living. The position of the working class in 1912, and let's face it, also today, it physically changes your brain. It raises your baseline cortisol. It depletes serotonin. It makes the threat detection system hyperactive. And this is so key, chronic low status physically changes the brain. It depletes your serotonin. It makes you more risk-averse and more attached to whatever stability there is around you, even harmful stability. In other words, the NHS spends billions on antidepressants. They're essentially treating a symptom of the class system. The messed up thing about all of this is that asking people to fight for inequality is essentially asking the people most harmed by it to take the greatest psychological risks.
In order to really engage in sustained, profound forms of protest, people need to be willing and able to tolerate a great deal of uncertainty, a great deal of possible insecurity and threats to their own safety. They may get arrested, they may get beaten up, and they may face costs in terms of relational connections to other people. Their family members may not even understand what they're doing. They're cut off, perhaps, from mainstream society. And this is one of the reasons, I think, that burnout rates are extremely high among social and political activists.
The risk to disrupt existing social bonds, to confront individuals that their nervous systems have already flagged as dominant and dangerous. We're going to go, we're the rich, we'll leave, to accept chaos before any new order arrives. Because the very neurobiology produced by chronic subordination is the neurobiology least equipped for exactly that ask. The economic and social system protects itself through the nervous systems of its victims. So when a show comes on, a beautiful show, set in a beautiful house, where the hierarchy is stable and, crucially, where the hierarchy sees you. A place where the powerful people there at least have the decency to acknowledge the humanity of the people below them. A place where everyone pulls together. Oh, it feels so good, doesn't it, to your cortisol-soaked, serotonin-depleted, risk-averse nervous system. That your nervous system goes, oh man, yeah, that. Oh, I could do with myself some of that. Oh, that feels good. And that wish is good because it's just seeing what a functioning society should feel like. The only problem is in the whole caboodle that the series Downton Abbey tells us that that world already existed. That once upon a time, there was a natural order of things, briefly and beautifully, in the before time, before the f***ing 20th century came along and f*** with it all and ruined it all. That once upon a time, the world was better. People were just happier and better back then. But no, they weren't. That world didn't exist. Certainly not like that. The prostitution statistics alone should tell you that. But then there's also the poverty statistics, disease and mortality statistics, with unelected lords voting down every single piece of social reform for a century. That should tell you that. Because when we watch Downton Abbey, we're longing for something actually that hasn't been built yet. And I know that could make you feel hopeless, because the same nervous system that makes you reach for the comfort of Downton Abbey also makes structural change feel too risky and uncertain, and too much of an ask for people that are already running on empty. But here is the other thing that Sapolsky also found, and it's brilliant and it's hopeful, and it's in the same study with the same baboons. The baboons had an outbreak of bovine tuberculosis that's killed specifically the aggressive dominant males, right? Because they were the ones who'd fought their way to the front of the garbage dump to eat, which is where they caught it.
Not only was it the case that if you were a more than averagely aggressive male, you died from this tainted meat, but in addition, if you were socially disconnected. Because all of this happened every morning when the garbage was being dumped at this lodge. So you would be willing to pick up, go a mile or two to go fight with a bunch of strange males. And this is the time of day where baboons are doing their most socializing and their most grooming and gossiping and all that sort of thing. So you were aggressive and you were willing to give up all the social connectedness to go to do this. So it killed half the males in the troop. And what you were left with was twice as many females as males, which was very atypical in the baboon world. And the guys who were there were nice guys. They got into fights, but they didn't beat up on somebody smaller as much after they lost the fight. They were more socially affiliative. They spent more time grooming. What you saw was the entire culture of this troop changed. They became more peaceful. They sat closer to each other. They had less fighting. They had lower stress hormone levels. Their immune systems worked better, which was the stuff I was mostly studying. By a decade later, after this TB outbreak, the troop still had this characteristic. But the key thing is all of the nice guy males from the time of the TB pandemic, they had long since died of old age. All of the adult males in the troop now who were carrying on these behaviors, they had shown up as jerky adolescents from some other baboon troop. And somehow they were learning, we don't do crap like that here. That's not the way we do stuff here. It was a case of cultural transmission. In a setting in which a baboon doesn't get dumped on by anyone else who's higher ranking, in a setting in which you get socially affiliated easily, average baboon troop, you're some squirrely adolescent male who shows up. It's an average of 70 days before somebody grooms you. In this troop, it was an average of 4 days. In a world in which you are like being treated better, you have a default state of calming down and being less stressed, and thus less in need of displacing aggression onto the smaller and weaker. Starting in the 60s, baboons were not just metaphorically, they were literally the textbook example of inevitable primate aggression and male dominance in stratified societies. And this is their nature, and they are like our ancestors living on the savannah. It took one generation to show that baboons had the cultural malleability in them, to show that none of that stuff was inevitable. In other words, if baboons have that degree of flexibility lurking in them, saying there's any really awful stuff that's inevitable about human behavior, you're way underestimating us as primates.
The biology changed because the social arrangement changed. Because it turns out that your nervous system is not destiny. It responds to the environment. If you build a different environment, you get different neurobiology. The longing that you have to watch Downton Abbey isn't just romantic. It's biologically grounded because our nervous systems are not destiny. They respond to the environment. So if you change the environment, the structure, the biology follows. It turns out that the culture came first and the neurobiology can come second, which means that we're not prisoners of our own stress responses. We are actually shaped by the social world around us, and social worlds can change. And that's why we should give billionaires and millionaires bovine tuberculosis. That's not actually what I'm suggesting.
Do you ever wish you'd gone another way? Worked in a shop or a factory? Had a wife and children?
Do you?
I don't know. Maybe. Sometimes.
So when 16 million people watch Downton Abbey, we are actually reaching for a different nervous system. A world where people have dignity, where they know who they are and why they matter. And also a place where the powerful people feel the weight of their power and they try to wield it with decency and make sacrifices of themselves for the greater good. Because in that version of the world, everyone, whatever their station, is seen as fully human and they pull towards something shared, a shared humanity. I mean, I can still love the things I love about Downton Abbey because it's not destiny and it offers a critique of class as well. It's just that the real thing that they're pulling together for isn't to save the house or the estate, but the feeling of shared respect of the people inside that house. Because while Downton Abbey gets the history catastrophically wrong, it gets the longing, the truth of the hope exactly right. And the fact that we recognise that we know what shared dignity looks like, means that we know what we need to aim for. Now, let's just head in that goddamn direction. Although, right now, I personally need to head in that direction because I think I can see Sapolsky heading towards me with a tranquilizer gun. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.
So what do baboons teach the average person in there? Don't bite somebody because you're having a bad day. Don't displace on them in any sort of manner. Social affiliation is a remarkably powerful thing, and that's said by somebody who lives in a world where ambition and drive and type A-ness and all of that sort of thing dominates. And one of the greatest forms of sociality is giving rather than receiving, and all of those things make for a better world. Another one of the things that baboons teach us is if they're able to, in one generation, transform what are supposed to be textbook social systems sort of engraved in stone, we don't have an excuse when we say there's certain inevitabilities about human social systems.